Okay, I am really hoping that this is going to work this time. This is honestly my third attempt to make this video for you, so I'm going to hope that it's all working well and eventually get to see this. So what do I need to include in an essay and how do I go about planning that is what we're going to look at in today's lesson. You'll see that unfortunately all of my notes are already taken and all of my example answers have been written, and that is because I've done this video several times over. So how do I plan for a literature essay? Yesterday you looked at a mock paper from AQA, which was from 2017. So that was a genuine paper that was sat 3 years ago now. And you also looked at a grade 9 sample essay, which was for the theme question from that paper. So before we move on from that, I want to point out a couple of things about the answer, because sometimes I think it can be a bit intimidating to read a grade 9 answer and think, how on earth am I going to recreate that and get my own grade 9 at the end of it? But I want to point out a couple of things that will hopefully help you feel a bit better. And hopefully the highlighting activity as well showed that you don't need too much of everything. You just need a little bit of everything to get a higher grade there. So if you look at the answer now, I've got on my screen, this is the one that you highlighted yesterday, but I've only highlighted the evidence from the text. So these are direct quotes from the play. And you can see there that there's literally 5 quotes in this entire essay, and they aren't long ones. They are 2 words or 3 or a couple of words. And the point behind this is this: if you look for asking for the earth, that comes very early on in the play, but all the other evidence comes from one piece of text, so the inspector's final speech. That's all taken from the inspector's final speech. So you can see that you can go into an exam without memorizing the entire script. You don't need that. You just need a couple of good quotes that you can break up, or you can use one word from, etc., to fit in with your essay. So it's not about memorizing the play, especially because you aren't given an extract. It's about the depth of knowledge of the purpose of the play, the context, and the events, and how they all link together. That is what's most important here. You aren't being marked for how well you remember quotes, whether you quote them correctly, or anything like that. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out, that this grade 9 essay has got 5 quotes, and 4 of them are taken from the same couple of sentences. Also, if you go back and read it and you look at the last line of each paragraph, you'll see that they link vaguely or loosely back to the question. And that is because this was written, I wrote this answer in exam conditions in the mocks last academic year in December. And I could feel myself in the exam setting. This was handwritten at first, going off on a couple of tangents and just feeling like I wasn't answering the question. So I would stop at the end of every paragraph and just put a line in, a couple of sentences that made sure that the examiner knew that I knew what the question was and my answer was focused on it. So it's worth just having some sentences at the end there that link back, which is what the R is in your Peter, and it's also what it means by link to the question. So as long as you know the destination you're headed towards, that's great, but you also need to bring your examiner along with you and make sure that they know where you're going and that they can be kind of reassured that you are going to get to the point. And if you get to the point at the end of every paragraph, rather than just at the end in your conclusion, that's going to be much more successful. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that and hopefully it will still record. I'll just leave it. Okay, so what do I include in an essay? We've talked about this in class. If you are working at a grade 5 or below at the moment, so your latest assessment or your classwork has been graded at that, we're going to stick with Peter as our structure. Okay, so your point, evidence, technique, explanation, reference. If you have a 6, even if you had a high 5, a 5 in the last assessment, or 6 and above, I would like you to start to step away from Peter, because when we are looking at higher level essays, it's very difficult to get to the kind of level of writing, the flow of writing that's needed to get the higher grade when you are still using such a constrictive formula. So you are going to be looking at the context, purpose. So these are the categories that were in your key yesterday. So context, purpose, evidence, authorial methods linked to the question. Authorial methods is basically, what did Priestley do and why did he do it? So if you say at the start of the play, Priestley introduces us to this character, that's an authorial method because you're saying he's chosen to bring that character in then. Okay, so just something worth. It might even be worth noting this down so that you've got a checklist, because later on in the lesson you are going to be answering an essay style question, so it's worth noting this down as an almost, I hate to say it, but like a checklist just for each paragraph to make sure that you're doing what you need to be doing. And in the exam as well, if you go in with this in your head just before you read it off a piece of paper, just before you go into that exam, obviously leave the paper behind, but then go in and get it down on your paper as quickly as possible, you're just guaranteeing yourself success in that exam. Right, let's move on to the character question. So we looked at the theme one yesterday, and today we're going to look at Mrs. Burling. You'll notice when we looked at character questions before, we looked at Mr. Burling and we looked at his traits, and that was how we structured the essay. So for example, we said in paragraph 1, he's presented as quite arrogant, he might be presented as dismissive, obnoxious, showing capitalist tendencies, etc. We can't do that here with Mrs. Burling because we've already been told the trait that we want to focus on, which is that she's unlikable. So we want to talk about how she's presented as an unlikable character, but we're still going to go with the 4 key arguments, 4 paragraphs, 4 arguments, but they're going to be the ways in which she is presented as unlikable, or her actions or events in the play. Okay, so obviously I've already planned this because I've done this video several times. So your essay structure should be as followed, and you will have this in front of you because I will attach it to the Show My Homework post. Introduce your essay. The introduction should be the purpose of the play. What was Priestley's goal? What was, how did he achieve that goal? So what was his intention when he sat down to write An Inspector Calls? We know that he was trying to sort of promote socialism and show the dangers of capitalism. Okay, so that's what you need to get in there. And then at the end, you're going to wrap up everything, purpose and all your arguments in a conclusion. So that's paragraph 1 and 6. And then in the middle of that, I've put that Mrs. Burling is viewed as unlikable because of her relationship with her children, her unwavering support of her husband and his views, her refusal to accept responsibility, and her excessive pride and lack of charity. So those would be my arguments. I don't want this video to go on for much longer, so I'm going to leave you with the document. But if you look down at the bottom of it, you'll see that I've written a sample paragraph that's grade 4-ish and a sample paragraph that's grade 7-ish. But both of those are short, the kind of introductions to the paragraph itself. They wouldn't be an entire paragraph. So you can have a look at those. The grade 4-ish one follows the Peter structure, and the other one is slightly less sort of intertwined with that. And then we're not going to write this answer because I've given you too much help for it. What you're going to do is go back to last week. Last week we planned 4 sample essays. You're going to pick one, you're going to look at your plan and make sure that it looks like the one here. So make sure you have got your introduction planned, your 4 key points, and then your conclusion. And go back to your checklist and make sure that you have got scope for including all of these things. So make sure you know how you're going to link your context in. Make sure you know which quotes you want to use and where, and how you're going to kind of, analyse those quotes. And make sure you're going to be linking back to the question. Then you are going to send me at the end of this lesson both your plan and your essay answer, okay? In fact, we're not going to do a whole essay answer. I would just like 1 paragraph if you send me your plan, because then I'll be able to see what the rest of your paragraphs would have looked like from that 1 paragraph. So just write me the introduction and the first paragraph, send me those and send me the plan. All right, I look forward to reading them.